better way to round off a conversation about getting paid what you deserve than with some more action-oriented tips to take into the job interview, as well as some insight into what wealthy people really do when they get into a job and what they pay attention to that most of the rest of us just don't. Keep in mind, Dr. Lucas isn't just speaking from theory. She's sharing as a person who's had lots of wealth in her life and is now sharing what she's experienced and learned on a practical level. That said, in this section in particular, she poses some questions that, if you take the time to consider, will help you evaluate your wealthy mindset as well and how you approach the topic of wealth for yourself. One last thing, I've got a new free download to help you create a wealthy mindset for yourself. And you can find that and the previous links to the other videos in the description below. Now, don't forget to click like and turn on your notification bell when you subscribe. Here we go.
I had worked in the job as interim, so they already saw what I can do. They already saw the changes that I could make. So my leaving that job, they would lose, it would be value that they were losing. So they did come up in salary. One of the things that you need to have when you're approaching a job is a vision. So many times people go in for a job and say, well, what do I have to do? Right? So you have to do your homework in that company. You have to find out what is their mission, right? What does this job entail, and where can you take this job, right? So you want to go in and be above and be more visionary than most of the people that are going to be competing for that job, because most people don't think of, where do I see this job going? They ask the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What they really want to know is, what do you see yourself doing in this job in 5 years? Right? Where can you take this job? So hopefully you're applying for a job that you have some knowledge about what it entails. So you have a vision, so you can have them see where that job could be, right? What you can do with that position. So with this job, I had no experience in disability support other than the 3-4 months that I did the job. I was fresh out of school. I hadn't even passed my license. I was like gonna take it, but I had a lot of experience and I was able to connect the dots. I was able to connect the administrative part of it. And I was able to say, this is where I would take this job. And the feedback I got from one of the people on the panel, if you know anything about a university hiring, it's ridiculous. It's just awful. You get panels. I want to say to them, you're not that important. But anyway, so the feedback I got from one of the people that was on the panel that said, you were the only one that had a vision. I had the least amount of experience in that particular job, but I was able to transfer the skills. I was able to say what the skill set was that I had, which, don't forget, I had a lot of administrative skills, right? I had supervised people, right? I had fired people. That's important, to be able to say that you have been put in the position of having to let go people, right?
Well, I have to say, you're right, but I also know that a lot of people that watch my channel, this channel, either are still in school, fresh out of school, a few years, so they're building their experience. And as you know, the frustration of a recent grad is, how do you, get a job that requires 5 or 10 years experience when you're just coming in? And I know one of the things I say is volunteer. I don't know what you might suggest.
So you go all the way back to you're 6 years old. Right? You have been gaining skills since the day you were born. I had a client last night that was talking about how, she was stubborn her whole life. And she said, my grandma taught all of the kids how to walk. She said, but I wouldn't let her teach me how to walk. I said, well, let me just tell you something. Grandma didn't teach them how to walk. They would have learned how to walk. They learned how to walk, right? So you learn how to do things. So you have to take an inventory of everything you've ever done, right? What did you do in school? Did you ever babysit? Did you have to manage a bunch of kids, right? did you ever teach, I don't know, some people, let's say if they belong to a religious organization, they've taught religion classes, right? So you really have to think about what you've done your entire life and show how that transfers, that experience transfers into this job. Now, if you're just getting out of school, you shouldn't be applying for a job that requires 10 years experience. That's not the kind of job. There's nothing wrong with taking an entry-level job. And there's nothing wrong with negotiating an entry-level salary at the top end of the salary. You should have worked and done internships. What did you do in your internship? You should have picked up a lot of experience in your internship. You should have been able to watch people do things in your internship, right? So you have to be able to, that goes back to bragging. You know, you have to be able to find the value in what you do and what you did. You know, I work, as I said, for a university. I also have 8 interns that work in our clinic. I supervise an intern personally who is an international student from China. Now, if you want to ever have an experience supervising a student who comes from a country that has a completely different mindset when it comes to, you know, social services and human services, it's a great experience, right? But so she's not really seeing a lot of clients because her accent is so heavy, and the cultural differences when she doesn't understand things like, you know, mental health and stuff. But she's still able to get experiences and learn how to transfer what she's done when she brings it back to China in their system. So it's thinking broadly, right? Hopefully every one of your viewers has had such a fabulous internship experience and a great supervisor. I say the best experience is a terrible internship.
Yeah.
An awful supervisor.
I agree.
Because you've had to figure out a way around that.
I agree.
Right? Your education is your own responsibility. So you've had to figure out how to improvise. You've had to figure out how to problem solve around that. I wish you a terrible internship.
I totally agree. And I used to teach social work. And when my students would come complaining about their placement, I would say, this is great. You have nothing but opportunity here. There's nowhere to go but up because it's so bad. So you're absolutely
your internship is not something that you're waiting to get to the end, right? It's you have to find value. I also teach. So I teach policy, I teach human behavior, I'm an adjunct. So I say we're like the McDonald's workers of, you know, like the higher ed, because they give you no benefits, they give you minimum wage and whatnot. But in those spaces, so as an adjunct, I have the flexibility and I have the experience to be able to teach in every single area of social work. Now, I know some people who adjunct and they will not take a class that's not, that's a new prep. They say, oh, I'm only going to teach practice, or I only want to specialize. What are you, nuts? You have to teach across the whole curriculum because that's where your value is. Because if they have at the last minute a class that they got to fill, they're going to call you. Because you have the experience to do that. And I learned that from a supervisor, a dean who was assigning classes. And I actually had her in my doctoral program. And she every single semester, she'd give me a class that was a new prep. And I would get so mad because the new prep, you know, it's like taking the class along with the students. But you only have to know this much more than they know. And you only have to be 5 minutes ahead of the class. That's it. Right?
Exactly.
So, you know, that's a whole nother thing. How do you teach and still have a life? You know?
Yeah, that is a whole other thing. I've done that as well. Now, I always try to remember to ask my guests on the show, because there's a certain type of person that I asked to be on the show. And you know, the type of person, again, has a wealth mentality, you know, doesn't have I should say, isn't limited with a typical way of thinking about money and wealth and income and value. And so this question is something that I want to hear from you. And the question is, what does being a rich social worker mean to you?
So a rich social worker to me means that you're not afraid to pay yourself. So what do I mean by that? So for example, if you work in an agency where they don't offer, because none of them do, a retirement plan, the time to think about retirement is not 5 years before you're going to retire. It's when you first enter the workforce, because if you start putting money away at that point, understanding the difference between understanding the whole tax structure that we work under, right? Understanding the value of money. So what do I mean by that? Let's say you go to work for an agency. The most important thing you need to understand is the fringe package that they're giving you, right? So agencies, particularly social service agencies that give low salaries, they tend to give what's called in-kind benefits, right? So what is the unpaid unpaid in money benefits that you're getting? One of those benefits might be there's a 403B plan, right? Meaning that, or a 401k plan, meaning you put some money in, they put some money in. I'm amazed at how many people don't take advantage of what's called the maximum amount of putting money into a 403B plan. So here's for instance, I had a colleague that worked for an agency where their match was progressive, meaning that when you first work there, you could start your 403B plan and you can put in whatever you want. And then after 2 years, the agency starts to match. And the agency will match progressively up to 10% or 8%. So at the time, my colleague was only putting in 5%, and he was already up to the 8%. And I'm like, you are leaving money on the table. He said, what are you talking about? I said, your agency will give you up to 8%. You're only getting 5% from them. So you're walking away from 3%. So I said to him, how much is it going to cost you to come up to that 8%? Don't forget, 403B and any retirement deductions are before taxes. Your money has a lot more value before taxes than after taxes. It also goes to reduce your tax bill. So how do you become a wealthy social worker? You have to think like wealthy people. You have to do the things that wealthy people do to make money. Wealthy people are not wealthy because they give their money away. Wealthy people are wealthy because they keep their money. And they look for every opportunity to keep money and make more money, right? Money's not dirty, and making money and having money is not evil. There's nothing wrong with that. So he looked at the numbers and he wound up realizing that it would cost him his lattes that he gets every day. Now he loves those lattes, and I don't say you have to go without lattes, but that's a want and need pile. Right? You're going to need money when you're old. You want that latte right now. So how about you kind of, stave off that impulse and that self-gratification of that latte, or make it at home before you leave, and put that money towards your retirement. So he did. So he managed to then get it up to 3%.
Excellent.
Another thing that social workers don't do. Let's say they get an increase in salary. They get a measly 2% or a measly 3%. So if that measly 2 or 3% only amounts to $25 in your paycheck, but it amounts to $50 before taxes, and you've been able to live without that $25, put that 50 in your 403B. And that's how you can build wealth. You can build wealth without feeling it. Or let's say you say, I can't afford to put the whole 50 in, put 25 in. So take advantage of those things in place that are already there to encourage you to save. How do you pay yourself before you pay other things, right? It's important for social workers to watch their spending, to recognize what are they spending money on. and try to find the areas where, you know, they probably are spending money in a way that they don't necessarily need to spend. Now, that's very individual. You know, social workers might say, you know what, I'm spending money, you know, I have to eat, I have to pay bills, I have to
self-care. I know that's a big one.
Right. So how do you self-care for free? Well, what is your self-care ritual? If your self-care ritual is based out of conditioning for self-care. So for example, how many times when you were a child were you crying and someone handed you something to eat, like a cookie, right? Or rewarded you with food? Recognize that your self-care may be around food, maybe around expensive food, maybe about going out to eat. Right now, the pandemic has presented a fabulous opportunity for people to find out where there's waste. Now, when I say waste, I don't mean that you know, you're wasting money spending time with folks. I'm saying that perhaps there are other ways that you can have a rich life, a rich social life that doesn't cost you a lot of money, right? Young people that are wanting to move out of their parents' home. They say, I can't afford an apartment. Yeah, it is very hard to afford an apartment on Long Island. But would you consider a roommate? Would you consider living with someone in order to launch? Right? I have a niece who's like, no, I want my own place. Right? Now, my partner lived in a house with shared a bedroom, right? Had the grandparents living there. So in the home, there was grandma and the two girls in a bed, bunk beds and a full-size bed. They bought their clothes at secondhand stores, right? They made a lot of food from scratch. They ate a lot of, you know, what she refers to as peasant food, you know, because her family's from Italy. So she has this mindset that nothing has to be new. So what are you willing to do, right? Are you willing to have a roommate? Are you willing to live in a neighborhood that you might not consider as desirable, right? Well, it's desirable if there's a home there that or an apartment there that is, you know, meets your needs. So it's like, what are you willing to do?
I can imagine my audience saying, yeah, I don't want to live like that forever. And I think you're talking about like to launch and to get your footing and to build your financial base.
Exactly. It's not living like that forever. If you don't make some compromises, you might live like the way you're living now forever. So here's for instance, my first apartment was 2.5 rooms, 2.5 rooms. And the walls went like this. Right? But it was affordable. And so I was willing to live in 2.5 rooms with a shower where the wall was like this and lived great because it was my first place. I was willing to buy used furniture or take used furniture. Actually, I didn't buy furniture till I bought my second house because I would take furniture no matter who was giving it away. Right? You have these apps like Let Go Now. And all of these things, you know, having this mindset of somebody else's trash is my treasure. So don't think of it as I don't want to live like that my whole life. Think of it as I'm willing to live like this now to build on it. Right?
You said the magic word mindset. And I think, and earlier you even said you don't have a problem, even though you don't have the boat, you don't have the pool, you don't have a problem going to your friends and borrowing that. And I think for me, I had kind of like a visceral reaction because I remember when I used to feel ashamed that, you know, we don't have these things. And so I shouldn't be allowed to, you know, enjoy what maybe someone else wants to offer me, you know, because I don't have it. I don't have that mindset anymore. You know, now if I buy something secondhand, in fact, I think this might have been secondhand and I'm very proud of it. It's like, please, I got a deal. I love this shirt. You know, it has still had the tag or not, whatever. But I'm also able to, you know, be in Florida. I'm in Florida now, be in Florida for however long, be in Alabama visiting family for 2 months, be in New York, go to Jamaica. Like I can do things that other people can't do because my mindset has shifted as well.
Yep.
And that's what you're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. So for example, there's this store called Savers. And I love this store because it's set up, first of all, like a department store. So, so many times secondhand stores, they reinforce the stigma of shame that I have to go in there and I have to buy stuff, and I'm not deserving to have, oh, please, sir, can I have this ripped shirt? So this store called Savers, it's set up like a department store, and there's shopping carts, and you go in there and there's family shopping. So what my partner and I do, my partner's just recently, her parents, not recently, but her parents had died and they had a house in Regal Park. And the mother was a hoarder, but the father was very good at packing away the hoard. So we are just going through now finding, like, there was not one space on the wall that was open. It was all these tchotchkes and stuff.
Wow.
So we've been, and her brother's blind. So he bought they negotiated so he can have the house, because it's the house he's been living in his whole life. So we've been cleaning out this house. So we've been taking all of these treasures and we'll go to Savers and we'll go in the back and we'll dump off all her stuff. And then we'll walk in the front door and go buy somebody else's stuff. So we recently, and we're older, so we recently bought property in Massachusetts, and we're going to build a home, a home on there. However long it takes to build this home, it's a modular home, and that's how long it's going to take. And I got to this point because I was willing to make these compromises in my life and be able to save enough money so that I could do that. So I've bought lamps for $3. And I remember walking out of the store with 2 matching lamps, $3 each. And this woman says, "Where did you find like 2 lamps?" Right. And my partner, I have to say, has a really good eye because she has lived secondhand her entire life. Like our house where we live, the only thing new in that house is what I brought to it when we moved in. Everything in this house is used. She's got a Crate and Barrel dining room set that she paid like $200 for, beautiful leather. So you have to be able to find value in somebody else's garbage. There's no shame in that. Like you say about clothing, the one thing that I noticed about her, but she's not in this field, she's a banker, so it's different. And because she's lived that way a lot longer than I did, when somebody says to her, "That's a really nice Columbia jacket, beautiful jacket," she's like, "You like it? I got it at Savers for $5. So I said to her, "You got to stop telling people." Like she brags about it. So that's the thing. You have to shift from a shame mindset to look at this. I got this for $5 and wear it with pride. So like you said, are you willing to buy secondhand clothes so that you can travel, right? What is your self-care plan? And so for you, I imagine your self-care plan is being able to travel, right?
Absolutely.
That's self-care.
Part of
right?
it, yeah.
A lot of folks think self-care is I'm going to go for a massage and I want a mani and a pedi, and no, right? Do you get outside? There's so much stuff you can do for free, or low cost. So if you buy a New York State park pass, that's probably now about $70 a year. It's getting up there. You can have access to every park in New York State for free. We're not free. So let's say you go to 6 parks. Right. So think about, how do you enjoy life and how do you do self-care? That's, that's really self-care, but it doesn't cost you a lot of money. So books, for example, do you buy books? I love to read. I'm a voracious reader and I love books. Like I was that student that bought all the books on the recommended list. One day I'm going to read them. I have books. I have so many books that I have a bookcase in my daughter's house, a bookcase in my house, because I'm just forbidden to like make it look like a library in here. And I have bookcases that are going to go into the new house if we ever build it. So I buy books, but I don't pay full price for books. I buy books cheap. I'll go to a library. a library is a cheap place, right? Because it doesn't cost you money. And I use a library. So take an inventory about what are you spending money on now? And there's always room that you can make room. Okay. Don't be afraid to work multiple jobs. So if your main job is just barely paying your bills, right? What are you doing to get your license? What are you doing? Have you got your LC yet? Are you picking jobs that are pushing your career forward? Right? Are you accepting jobs or are you applying for jobs with your future self in mind? So one of the things I always ask myself, and I've done this for years, what would my future self think about this decision? Would my future self be glad I did this? Right? So being able to think down the road, have a vision of what you want your life to look like, and being able to take the steps towards that by being able to delay gratification now in favor of the future. So one of the ways that you can acquire wealth, as I said, is through thinking more broadly about retirement plans, right? Then you can also take advantage of what are the things that are available to you for free. So if your agency, and I know that not a lot of them do this, but do they offer you professional development opportunities, right? Are you engaged in professional development that is acquiring skills to make you more marketable, right? Have you thought about continuing education? Have you thought about those certificate programs that will position you with skills that are desirable? Let's say your goal is to have a private practice. I was never interested in a private practice. I have a private practice. So how did that happen? Well, working where I work, in 9/11 happened. And there was a cry for, right? There was a shortage. If anybody was practicing back then, you remember there was a real shortage of mental health practitioners. So I said, all right, I'll do it. And the university that I work for needed someone because they only had one clinician.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, only one, in the counseling center. I now run the counseling center with 15 per diems. That's a whole nother way, a whole nother thing I did. But so they needed someone to seek students one-on-one per hour per diem. I said, oh, I'll do that, and I think they paid me something like $25 an hour, $20 an hour, which people are like, I'm not going to go do that. Why not? What are you doing with that hour? Right? So think about, what are you doing with that hour? Are you making $20 an hour, or are you just not doing something with that hour? So be able to recognize and quantify and to commodify your time, right? So is $25 an hour? If you are a social worker, that you are working towards social justice, towards living wage, right?
Right.
Why is that not a living wage? Why is that okay for $15 an hour to be okay for people as a living wage, but that's not a living wage for you? What were you going to do with that hour? Were you going to binge watch TV? The currently doing telehealth is provided oodles of opportunity because you don't even have to leave your house and you can make money, right? So I was given that opportunity and I said, okay. And I started seeing students one-on-one. And I love doing clinical work. I just don't want to do it every day for 8 hours a day. That's just my personality.
Yeah, me too.
Because after a while, I'm just doing my grocery list in my head. I want to stay engaged.
Right.
And I also don't want to commodify people that I have to keep them in, like they're not going to get better because I need them to pay my rent. So that's why it's important to have, if you have a job and have a practice, and if you want to have a full-time practice, to recognize that if you're going to have a full-time practice, you want to have a full-time practice where you hire other practitioners, right? Because then you're going to acquire wealth through training them, through mentoring them, through providing supervision, which is a benefit in kind, and paying them an hourly wage that is a livable wage, but that you can make money off them. That's another thing we're not willing to do, is make money off of people. Why not?
Yeah, I feel like we could continue to talk about this, but I also know my audience, And I know that if they've made it this far, they've gotten a lot of information and likely will have a lot of questions come up as well. So can you let my audience know where they can find you? Are you, do you do speaking? Do you have a website? Is there a platform that you use where people can connect with you?
So usually people just do what my friend did. They just contact me. They ask for advice. I am available for consultation, right? I am available for supervision. People can just write to me at clucasphd@gmail.com. That's probably the best way to connect with me. In my opinion, knowledge and experience has no value unless it's shared, right? It's like money. If it's not in circulation, you could have a whole boatload of money and not do anything with it. Here's a really quick example of that. My partner's parents, who never went out, they never traveled, they never did anything, they bought everything secondhand, they handmade everything, blah, blah, blah. Save. You could do too much saving. When they died, they left a boatload of money to their kids. The most money the only time they ever spent money was on their funerals. That's terrible. I'm not leaving a dime to my kids. Nothing. I'm leaving a legacy of them knowing me.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I don't share my wealth, right? Because I truly believe what you put out there comes back to you, right? So I do share. I help them out when they need help. But I have to say my one daughter is just wildly successful. And it's because I said to her, don't worry about making money. Do what you love. And you can always come back and live with me. And that, I think, alone keeps them out of the house.
That's motivation.
Right. But don't be worried about money. Right. You'll live. Most people, and I would say even in your audience, and they're going to say that you don't know, you will never likely be homeless, meaning that doesn't mean you will always have your own home. But if you have family, and if you have family of choice, and so spend your time cultivating relationships.
Absolutely.
Right? And cultivate your own tribe, right? And don't be afraid to ask for help when you need help. So I have no problem talking with folks if they want to just call me and ask for my opinion. I don't have a website. I just never took the time to do something like that. I am available for workshops, to give workshops on, I do a lot of different workshops on a lot of different things. So it's whatever people would want me to do.
This has been so rich and pun intended, I suppose. So I really appreciate you being here and being willing to share. And again, I really love your perspective and appreciate your perspective, especially not having come from social work. And I think, again, it just, qualifies what I try to share on this channel, which is there is another way to think about, how we enter the profession and how we show up and what we expect and what we command. And you've just affirmed all of that with some amazing examples and some really great quotes, by the way. So thank you. Honestly, thank you so much, Carol. I'm so glad to be in touch with you.
Thank you, Eva. I am so glad to meet you. It was humbling for me to realize that there are so many people that struggle with, commodifying and themselves and their value, right? And that's I would like to change that. I would like to change that.
You're doing the work, just being on the channel here. And so you're absolutely making a difference. So like I always say on my channel to all my viewers, I believe you can dream, be, do, or have anything you want, but it starts with your mindset. So make sure it's a rich one.
Yes. Thank you so much.